Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another wonderful Frame It Friday. Today is going to be another custom special teach you guys how to do something engineering related. We're going to talk a little bit about geometry, a little bit about math. Not actually, just kidding. No math. No math on this one, just geometry, just looking at shapes and understanding how things work. And yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about tributary area because we touched base on that last week and it's a tough topic. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it here. So, what you see in front of you is the whiteboard. This is a happy face. And we're happy because we're going to learn about tributary areas today. My name is Sam Stevenson, guys. I've been obsessing about framing for a while, and I'm here to show you guys how engineers think about framing. So let's get straight into it. If I have a house and my house is a rectangle, what I'm going to try to discern today is complex tributary areas. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I hate how I can't do that. We're talking a little bit about how this works. So first, if I have two things and they hold up what we call a beam or something in between, and I'm concerned with some kind of uniform load spread around the beam or whatever, if we consider all these uniform loads, like if we make a roof, there is an average like weight of the roof shingles over an area. So we use information like that to you know describe our, like we say the roof live load is 20 pounds per square foot or the roof dead load is 10 pounds per square foot, whatever it is. We use all these average uniform loads. So what we're going to do today is talk about how we take these uniform loads and we can use geometry to figure out what a point load might be in one particular scenario. Let's say there was a roof brace on this beam. I might want to know how much weight is potentially going through this roof brace. So today I'm going to show you guys with a few different roof shapes how we do that. So let's get into it. So the first assumption we have to talk about with tributary areas is we're using the idea that we take, let's change colors. We take half of the area of something. So let's say I want to know how much weight is right here on this end of the beam. I would take half of the load if it's uniform. I take half of the weight of all this stuff and I get some kind of number. So if this linear footage is 50 pounds, I'm doing this with my mouse. So here we go. Pretty good. That's 50 pounds per linear foot. That's a uniform linear foot load across the beam. Well, if I have 5 feet from here to the middle, then I would just take 5 feet, multiply it by 50 pounds per linear foot, and I would get the total weight on this half of the beam. And it has to be this number here. So 5 times 50 is 250 pounds. Okay. So I'm going to use the same concept, but in 3D this time. Okay. But you have to understand where this is coming from, where I use the halfway point thing, because I'm going to describe, excuse me, I'm going to describe why this halfway part is important. So first, let's go back over to our roof. That's our roof looking top down. Here's our roof planes. Let's say it's a gable style roof. There's a ridge running down the middle. And that would mean that our rafters are going left to right. And we're only going to consider one half of this first because that's all I care about. And let's say I want to know what the tributary load is on this wall. Maybe I have a header in the wall. Maybe there's a beam or something I've got to cover. I want to know what the tributary width is of the roof area on this wall. So what do I do? Well, I want to look closer at the wall and I want to think, what is sitting on the wall? That's the first question. Well, right here and right here and right here, a rafter sits on the wall. And so that is a place where load will be transferred down into the wall. Weight from above is sitting on the wall and passing down below. Okay. So if that's where my rafters are sitting, excuse me, figures as soon as I start talking, I would yawn. If that's where my rafters are sitting, then what's sitting on top of my rafters? That's the next question. Well, your roof sheathing, your shingles, everything that makes the roof is putting weight on the rafters. So we consider the whole roof plane area to be some uniform load. 10 pounds per square foot of dead load, 20 pounds per square foot of live load. Those are the numbers we would use generally. But that's what we got. So if I want to know what is my tributary width of weight of roof across this whole wall, I would just take the widest width of the part that I care about. Well, on the left side of this wall, there's an eave. Well, it's pretty obvious that like all of the weight of the eave is on the wall because it's on this side and there's nothing else holding it up out here. On the right side, the rafter sits on the wall and it goes up and it hits the ridge. And the ridge probably is braced off and the ridge is acting as the load bearing member. So the rafter is effectively spanning between the ridge and the wall. Well, halfway between those two things, just like the beam example I gave you, we would take that spot right there, which is halfway between the support and the support, and we would say, well, what is the distance between here and the farthest other end, which is the edge of the roof? And I'd say, hey, what's that distance? That would be my tributary width of load across this whole thing. So if that was 6 feet, I would say, hey, this wall is carrying 6 feet of roof. That is how I would describe that. So that's a more linear example. Let's do a more complicated example. Let's do this is gonna be a little quicker of a lesson today. Let's do a hip roof. So same building, same roof outline, but this time we have a hip roof, which means there's 4 hips all coming up to a single point in the center. And let's say we're going to, for sake of science, we're running a beam across this room and we want to know, hey, we're going to put one brace in the center of this building and there's a point load right in the center of the beam. How much is that load? How many pounds am I putting in the center of the beam? How do we find that out? Well, let's find out by drawing. Okay, so first let's think about what are the rafters doing? Okay, the rafters are starting up at the hips and valleys and they're going down to the walls. I'm going to draw these in because it's going to be helpful for you to see them. A good framer would line these up, of course. And they would also not be squiggly. But all these rafters are in a line and they're going to help us determine how we'd figure a complex tributary area for something that's not so obvious. And these can get kind of funny. And honestly, in the engineering world, if they get kind of funny, we usually just conservatively approximate stuff. But here's how this would work. The first thing you'd think of is to change colors. Let's go to thin red. So what's going on here is I'm going to brace the peak and put all that weight on the beam below. If I do that, then I have to think, okay, well, my brace is holding up the peak. Well, what weight is on the peak? Well, that's a question of what members are joining together at the peak. Well, it's going to be all of the hips and all of these king common rafters. The king common rafter is the one that like comes up to the peak in the center. So if I need to know that, I should then think, okay, if those are the 4 things adding load to my spot, let's go halfway and mark between one at a time, the one support to the other support. So let's take this king common rafter right here. One support is at the peak, and I go down, the other support is at the wall. Let's do this hip next. One support is at the peak, the hip runs all the way down, and it's supported here out at the corner. And it's the same for all the other ones. Okay? So that's where the other support is. And we need to know that because that's going to give us a little bit of a shape definition here. So now let's make a small mark at the halfway point between each support on each member. Right here, probably about right here, about here, about here. Okay. And you can kind of see how the tributary area is starting to form up. It kind of looks like it's this rectangular area here, but technically it's not. And I'll explain why. Now, this is being like super duper like specific, and you could just use this rectangular area and it would, excuse me, it would approximate pretty close. But the most technical thing is actually going to get a little more crazy. So it's easy here at the kings because we know where these are. So our tributary area is going to be following these dots. But there is actually another point in between all these that we have to do to make the right shape. And here's what happens. Let's use this one for example. So let's say that this midpoint happens right on these rafters. So it makes it easy to visualize. Okay. So on this hip, there is weight. Let's take like this one right here. So in this spot, there is a rafter on both sides of the hip, and it's putting weight on the hip. So what do we do if we want to know how much weight is there? Well, we'll go halfway down the thing. We'll mark it. We'll go halfway down the thing and mark it. And you see what's happening is you're actually going outside this rectangular area. So let's do that again. Let's go to this rafter, halfway down and mark it, and halfway down and mark it. See what's happening to the tributary area? It's actually changing shape a little bit. So I'm going to keep doing that. Now here's where it's a little bit tricky. You want to go parallel with the rafters and mark it in a spot and like it's invisible. It's floating, right? And out here, you're going to go parallel with the rafters down to approximately the halfway point between the wall and the hip. Same here. Same here. Down to about there. And then look what happens if I trace this out. Let's use a new color. Purple. Beautiful. Let's use purple. Okay. So I'm going to start right here. We're going to go down the follow the rafter. And then we're actually going to go up and follow the lines. And then we're going to go down to the next point. And then we're going to go up, parallel with the rafters, up to the next point. Parallel with the rafters, up to the next midpoint. Parallel with the rafters, up to the next midpoint. Parallel with the rafters, up to the next midpoint. Now, what a weird shape. Do you see how that's a different area than if we had just rounded off and made our rectangle? This is a more correct area because what would happen is if you tributary area all of the loads that are coming down, you would account for the entire roof. Okay, so if there was some point load on the edge of this roof, it would use this area right here or this area right here, right? So the idea is that if you were to draw all of the loads, you would be able to mathematically, geometrically account for all of the areas that are loading the roof. So if this was like weird other point loads or something funny going on, like if you had a bunch of posts, this is a big covered carport or something, and there was a post in each one of these locations. You want to know how much weight's on the post from the roof. This is how you would do it. So you can see the center is actually holding most of the weight of this roof by just visually looking at the area. So that is what's going on. And yeah, if you were to shade it in, I mean, I'm not going to do this very well because I'm using a mouse. But it would look something like this. Now, if you were doing this and drawing this in AutoCAD or any other software that was like, a CAD software, you'd be able to grab this polyline object and figure out what is the square footage that it exists in this area. So you don't do like ridiculous math by hand. You would just be able to use a computer. And what you would do is you say, well, how much? Let's get to the final point. How much weight is on the center of that beam? Well, let's say it was a total of 113 square feet of area inside the center. Well, we take our roof load, which is normally 10 PSF dead load, and we take 20 PSF live load. Oh, that's DL, dead load. Copy the units down, whatever. Okay, and then we would just multiply it out. So you'd have 1,130 pounds of dead load, and you just double the number, 2,260 pounds of live load. And these are numbers that you can actually plug into that Forte Web software that I used last Friday on the beam calculation. So that's how we can calculate a more complex tributary area. Hopefully that has been helpful. And if not, feel free to comment, ask questions, do whatever you need to do, and I'll just keep on teaching things that I think people might want to learn. And if you would like to make a request, feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Quick chat shout out first of all, though, because we got chat. We got Mr. Will Stevenson supporting. Hey guys, I'm going over to see this DGen Roundtable right here on the screen. I'm actually going over to the DGen Roundtable stream in a few minutes. So go check it out over there. It is a great cryptocurrency group. We talk about how to build wealth, make money. This is a book club that I'm going to be participating in and talking with. So go check them out. They're very helpful people, and it does look like a giraffe. Thank you so much, Mr. Will. All right, let's take it out with one and only music by The Green Observer.
That's the code.